Most people aren't locked behind bars, but they're still prisoners, and the warden is their own mind. If your emotions are running your life, then your life is running from your calling. Most people live their lives at the mercy of their emotions. They wake up happy if the weather is good or they got enough sleep. They feel angry if someone cuts them off in traffic. They're motivated if life is going their way and discouraged if it isn't. But here's the truth that can shift everything. Emotions are messengers, not masters. They were never meant to lead you. They were meant to inform you. Emotions are like internal alerts from your soul, your spirit, and sometimes even your past. But just because they show up loud doesn't mean they're right, and it certainly doesn't mean they should take the wheel. Think about your phone for a moment. When it buzzes with a notification, you glance at it, you read it, but you don't let every message change your entire day. You don't let a spam email derail your purpose. So why do you let a passing feeling disrupt your focus, steal your joy, or cause you to make decisions that don't align with who you really are? It's because somewhere along the way, we started confusing emotions with truth. We started believing that if we feel something strongly, then it must be real, and if it's real, it must be right. But strong doesn't mean accurate. Loud doesn't mean wise. And emotions, though real, are not always rooted in truth. Let me give you an example. Imagine a man standing at the edge of a stage about to speak. His heart is racing. His palms are sweaty. He feels afraid. His body is sending the message, "You're in danger." But is he actually in danger? No, his fear is based on a perceived threat, not a real one. That emotion is a messenger saying, "Hey, I care about how people view me," or "I don't want to mess this up." That emotion is not his master. It's just a signal. If he obeys that feeling and walks off stage, he misses his moment. But if he acknowledges it, thanks it for its message, and moves forward anyway, he grows. He conquers, he builds. That's the difference between being led by emotions and being informed by them. Now, let's take it deeper. If you were created in the image of God, then your spirit should be king, your mind should be servant, and your emotions should be tools. But many people have flipped that order. They let their emotions be king, their mind be slave to how they feel, and their spirit becomes silent in the chaos. And then they wonder why life feels unstable, why they keep starting and stopping, why every relationship is fragile, and why they can't seem to stay consistent. It's because they've let their emotions master them, when they were meant to master their emotions. Your emotions are loud, but they're not Lord. They scream, but they don't decide. Every time you react out of anger, fear, or insecurity, you're handing over power to a messenger that was never qualified to run your life. But when you pause, when you sit in the discomfort, process the feeling, and respond from alignment instead of emotion, you take back the authority that was always yours. Here's something powerful. Emotions often carry wisdom, but only when filtered through truth. Grief can reveal what you value. Anger can reveal where boundaries were crossed. Sadness can uncover where healing is needed. Joy can affirm what aligns with your soul. But if you don't know how to separate signal from story, you'll assign meaning to your emotions that was never meant to be there. You'll say, "I feel unworthy, so I must be," or "I feel anxious, so this must be dangerous." That's how the enemy manipulates emotions, by wrapping lies in intense feelings. You've got to become the gatekeeper of your emotional world. You can't afford to outsource your stability to how you feel in a moment. That's why some people never build anything consistent. One day they're inspired and driven. The next day they're discouraged and avoidant. Their emotions are in charge, so their life is always on pause, waiting for the right feeling to show up. But purpose doesn't wait for feelings. Success doesn't respond to emotional comfort. It responds to alignment, obedience, and discipline. The greatest breakthroughs in your life won't come when you feel like it. They'll come when you don't feel anything at all, but still choose to move. They'll come when you're afraid, but take the step anyway. They'll come when your mind is screaming quit, but your spirit says press forward. That's emotional mastery, not pretending you don't feel, but refusing to be led by what you feel. So when emotions rise up, fear, insecurity, jealousy, resentment, ask yourself, what message are they trying to deliver? What's the truth here? And then ask, who's the master in this moment? My spirit or my feelings? Because until you understand that emotions are messengers, not masters, you will always live beneath your calling, waiting for the perfect feeling to move. But once you learn to hear them without obeying them, that's when your life becomes powerful, anchored, and unstoppable. What you focus on, you feel. That's not just a motivational phrase. It's a spiritual and neurological law. Wherever your attention goes, your emotions follow. Your feelings don't just randomly show up. They are produced, multiplied, and magnified by the thoughts you meditate on. Your focus is the steering wheel of your emotions. It doesn't matter how strong you are, how spiritual you are, or how much potential you carry. If your focus is broken, your feelings will be chaotic. And if your feelings are chaotic, your life will be directionless. Have you ever noticed that the more you think about what someone did to you, the angrier you get? The more you replay that conversation, the more the resentment grows. That's not because the offense changed. It's because your focus amplified it. The human mind was designed by God to magnify what it meditates on. That's why the word says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. You're not just thinking thoughts. You're shaping your emotional atmosphere, your internal reality, and ultimately your destiny. Focus is like a magnifying glass. Take a small flame and a magnifying glass under sunlight. Suddenly you've got fire. Not because the light changed, but because the lens intensified it. The same is true with your mind. If you focus on problems, they burn hotter. If you focus on offense, it gets deeper. If you focus on fear, it becomes paralyzing. But if you shift your focus to faith, to gratitude, to truth, your emotional experience changes completely, even if your situation hasn't changed at all. And that's where most people miss it. They think they need their circumstances to change before their emotions do. But your emotions don't start on the outside. They're fueled on the inside. You can be in the middle of a storm and still feel peace, not because the storm disappeared, but because your focus shifted. You started focusing on who God is instead of what life looks like. You started magnifying the promise instead of the problem. And when you do that, the atmosphere inside of you becomes stronger than the chaos outside of you. That's why worry is so dangerous. Worry is just worship in reverse. It's giving your focus, your energy, your attention, your imagination to what you don't want. It's meditating on failure. It's magnifying what might go wrong. And then we wonder why our emotions spiral. You've been feeding fear with focus. You've been growing anxiety with attention. If you fed your faith the same way you fed your worry, you'd be unstoppable. Let me say it another way. Your emotions are not random. They are responses. They are reflections. They are results. So if you constantly feel heavy, anxious, offended, bitter, don't just ask God to remove the feeling. Ask Him to reveal the focus that produced it. Because until you shift your focus, the feeling will always come back. You can rebuke depression in the morning and be drowning in it by noon. because your focus went right back to what broke you. Think about this in practical terms. If you start your morning scrolling social media, comparing your life to others, your focus is on lack. Now you feel behind. You feel like you're not enough. You feel anxious, and you haven't even gotten out of bed. But if you start that same day in prayer, in the Word, in gratitude, now your focus is aligned. Same morning, same person, entirely different emotional experience, all based on focus. People say, I just can't stop feeling this way. But that's a lie the enemy wants you to believe. The truth is, you're choosing to focus on the very thing that sustains that feeling. You may not have control over every thought that enters your mind, but you do have control over what stays, and what stays is what grows. And what grows is what governs you. You've got to become ruthless with your focus. You've got to guard it like your future depends on it, because it does. If you constantly focus on what you don't have, you'll feel unworthy. If you focus on what went wrong, you'll feel stuck. But if you focus on what's possible, what God promised, and what's in your hand, your emotions will begin to rise in alignment with your calling. This is why Scripture tells us, set your mind on things above. That's not just spiritual language. It's a divine instruction on emotional freedom. You can't have a renewed life with an unrenewed focus. You can't walk in peace while meditating on chaos. You can't feel joy while fixating on what's missing. You've got to redirect your attention to what builds you, what grounds you, and what reminds you who you are and whose you are. Your feelings will always reflect what you're feeding. If you feed fear, fear will grow. If you feed offense will grow. But if you feed faith, love, and vision, your emotions will follow, your spirit will rise, and your life will start to reflect the freedom you were born to walk in. Most people live on autopilot, allowing their emotions to narrate their reality without question. They wake up feeling heavy and assume it's going to be a bad day. They experience anxiety and decide they're overwhelmed. They feel discouraged and start to believe they're not good enough. But there's a higher way to live, one that puts your spirit in charge instead of your soul. And that begins with a simple but powerful shift. Speak to your soul. Don't let it speak to you. Your soul is your mind, your will, and your emotions. It's the seat of your feelings, desires, and internal narratives. But your soul was never designed to lead your life. Your spirit, your God-given truth, aligned inner man's supposed to lead. When your soul runs the show, your life will be driven by moods instead of mission, by reactions instead of revelation. That's why David, a man after God's heart, would regularly speak to his soul. He didn't just listen to what his emotions were saying, he talked back. He commanded his inner world into alignment with the truth. Why are you downcast, O my soul? Hope in God. That wasn't David asking a passive question. That was David interrupting his soul's false narrative with spiritual authority. He wasn't waiting to feel better. He was shifting his internal atmosphere through the power of spoken truth. He understood something most people forget. Feelings can lie, but truth doesn't. And when you speak truth out loud, you realign your soul with the voice of your spirit. Too many people have given their soul the microphone and let it preach sermons of defeat, fear, insecurity, and limitation all day long. They say things like, I'm just not built for this, or I'll never get ahead, or I always mess things up. They're repeating what their soul is whispering in moments of fatigue, frustration, or failure, and they don't realize that they're agreeing with emotions that were never supposed to define them. But what if you stopped listening and started leading? What if, when discouragement showed up, you said, Soul, you will bless the Lord today. You will magnify the truth. You will stand in joy, even if you don't feel like it. You don't need to feel strong to speak strength. You just need to open your mouth and let your spirit take over, because your words shape your world. Your declarations create direction. And when you speak to your soul, you're taking back territory the enemy tried to steal. There's a reason the word says, "Let the weak say, I am strong." It doesn't say, "Let the weak feel strong." It says, "Say it," because your mouth has the power to shift your emotions. If you wait to feel strong before you speak strong, you'll stay stuck in weakness. But when you open your mouth and declare who you are based on truth, not temporary feelings, your soul starts to catch up. And don't miss this, your soul is always listening. Every word you say to yourself, internally or out loud, is a seed. You're either planting faith or fear, peace or panic, power or passivity. So when you keep repeating what's wrong, what's hard, what hurts, your soul magnifies it. But when you speak life, speak vision, speak promise, your soul begins to follow. You train your emotions the same way you train a muscle, with consistent resistance and direction. Some people say, "That sounds fake. I don't want to lie to myself." But there's a difference between denial and declaration. Denial ignores reality. Declaration speaks a higher truth. You're not pretending the storm isn't there. You're reminding your soul that God is bigger than the storm. You're not ignoring the pain. You're commanding your soul to trust the one who heals. You're not being dishonest. You're being deliberate. Speaking to your soul is not about hype. It's about alignment. It's about reminding your inner world who's really in charge. You may feel abandoned, but you are chosen. You may feel unqualified, but you are anointed. You may feel tired, but you are graced. When you start declaring truth in the middle of emotional chaos, you begin to take territory back from the lies and fears that have kept you bound. Every time you open your mouth to speak life over your soul, you're building inner strength. You're teaching your emotions that they don't run your life. Your spirit does. You're setting order. And when order is restored, peace follows. You can't afford to be silent while your soul preaches defeat. You've got to get bold, get loud, get intentional, because your future depends on your willingness to lead your inner world with your voice, not your feelings. Speak to your soul. Command it into alignment. Don't wait for the storm to pass. Speak peace into the storm. Don't wait for the emotion to fade. Speak truth until it bows. Don't wait for your soul to give you permission. Take authority and give it direction. Because when your spirit speaks, your soul listens, and when your soul obeys, your life changes. Most people build their emotional life on unstable ground because they don't know who they are. They let how they feel determine how they show up. If they feel overlooked, they act small. If they feel rejected, they isolate. If they feel unworthy, they settle. But feelings were never designed to define identity. Identity was designed to govern emotions. When you don't know who you are, you'll be a slave to how you feel. But when your identity is rooted in truth, your emotions begin to take their rightful place, submitted, not supreme. You were never meant to wake up every day wondering if you're valuable, if you're loved, if you have what it takes. That uncertainty creates emotional chaos. One moment you're confident, the next you're second guessing. One compliment can lift you, and one criticism can destroy you. That's the life of someone whose emotions are in charge and whose identity has not been secured. But the moment you anchor your identity in something higher than your feelings, something unshakable, you stop riding the emotional roller coaster and start walking in peace, authority, and purpose. Your emotions are real, but they aren't always true. You might feel like you're not enough, but that's not your truth. You might feel unseen, but that's not your identity. You might feel defeated, but that's not your inheritance. If your emotions have more influence than your identity, then your life will constantly be out of alignment. But when your identity governs your emotions, you become immovable. Storms may come, feelings may shift, but your foundation doesn't. The problem is, too many people are more familiar with their wounds than they are with their worth. They're more connected to their past than to their purpose, and that disconnect becomes a breeding ground for emotional instability. When life triggers an old memory, they collapse. When someone says something that touches an unhealed place, they explode or retreat. That's what happens when your identity is reactive instead of rooted. You become a mirror of your environment instead of a reflection of the truth. But when you truly know who you are, when your identity is grounded in something divine, you don't allow temporary emotions to rewrite eternal truths. You may feel fear, but you respond in faith. You may feel unappreciated, but you continue to show up. You may feel tired, but you speak strength. Because you've made a decision, my identity leads, my emotions follow. That doesn't mean you ignore your emotions. It means you interpret them through the lens of truth. You recognize when fear is trying to lie to you. You see when discouragement is trying to cloud your vision. And instead of bowing to it, you rise above it. You remind yourself, I am not what I feel. I am who I was created to be. Think of it like this. Emotions are passengers, not the driver. They can be in the car, but they don't get to touch the wheel. Your identity, your God-given assignment, your purpose, your worth, that's what drives the car. So when fear says, turn back, your identity says, keep moving. When insecurity says, you're not ready, your identity says, you were called for this. When shame whispers, you'll never change, your identity shouts, you are redeemed. The most powerful people are not the ones who never feel anything. They're the ones who feel everything, but still choose to live from truth. They're aware of the emotion, but they're ruled by their convictions, not their chemistry. Their decisions are anchored in identity, not dictated by emotion. That's why they can stay consistent when others quit. That's why they can love when others hate. That's why they can build when others break down. If you're constantly overwhelmed by emotion, it's not a personality issue. It's an identity issue. You've allowed your emotions to become louder than your values, and the only way to fix it is to flip the order. You must decide, once and for all, that who you are in truth is more real than what you feel in moments. You must decide that your emotions are valid, but they are not the authority. So when life gets loud, when emotions rise up, when your soul starts to spin, you pause, you breathe, and you remember, I am not moved by what I feel. I am anchored in who I am, and who you are is not defined by pain, people, or performance. Who you are is defined by your Creator, confirmed by truth, and carried out through consistency. That identity has to speak louder than your insecurity. It has to rise above your anxiety. It has to lead, even when emotions scream. You don't get to choose how you always feel, but you do get to choose who you follow, your emotions or your identity. When you choose identity, you choose freedom, you choose peace, you choose alignment. And that's when your life begins to reflect the power and purpose you were always meant to. While K in emotional discipline is one of the most underrated yet most essential qualities of a person walking in true power. Most people are asking for more influence, more authority, more favor, but they haven't yet learned how to govern their emotions. And here's the truth most people miss. Until you master your inner world, you'll never have consistent dominion in your outer world. You cannot walk in spiritual authority while being emotionally unstable. Dominion starts with discipline, and discipline starts with how you handle the feelings that rise up inside you daily. It's easy to be strong when everything is going your way. It's easy to be peaceful when life is peaceful, but spiritual maturity is revealed not in comfort, but in conflict. Can you stay rooted when your emotions are trying to pull you out of position? Can you choose stillness when anxiety is knocking on your door? Can you keep your mouth shut when anger is begging to speak? That's not weakness. That's power. That's authority. Because anyone can react, but it takes discipline to respond from alignment instead of emotion. See, your emotions are not evil, but they are unpredictable. They were never designed to lead. They were designed to follow. And when you allow your emotions to become your master, you're no longer led by the Spirit. You're led by circumstances. You go from high to low based on how people treat you, how much money you made that week, how many likes you got, or how appreciated you feel. That kind of instability will always block you from operating in dominion. Why? Because you're not ruling your emotions. Your emotions are ruling you. The word says, "He that rules his spirit is better than he that takes a city." Think about that. The greatest victories in life are not external. They're internal. It's one thing to conquer the world, but it's another thing to conquer yourself. That's the battlefield most people avoid. They want to cast out demons, but haven't cast out the bitterness in their own heart. They want a prophecy to nations, but can't even speak life over their own soul. They want to shift atmospheres, but haven't yet shifted their own patterns of emotional reactivity. Every time you choose discipline over dysfunction, you take spiritual ground. Every time you pause before reacting, breathe before speaking, and respond with intention rather than impulse, you are walking in dominion. And dominion doesn't mean you feel powerful. Sometimes it means you feel weak, but still act from truth. It means your behavior is not dictated by your emotions, but by your identity. It means you show up in peace even when life is in pieces. That's what makes you dangerous to the enemy. Understand this. Spiritual authority is not just about speaking in tongues or laying hands. It's about emotional stewardship. Because how can you lead others if you can't lead yourself? How can you carry weight in the Spirit if you keep collapsing under the weight of your feelings? How can you hear God clearly when your emotions are constantly shouting over His voice? Emotional discipline clears the static. It opens up the channel. It puts you in a posture to receive, discern, and move with precision. It also protects your destiny. A moment of emotional compromise can cost you years of progress. One reaction out of anger, one decision driven by fear, one lapse in self-control can unravel what God's been building in your life for decades. That's why the enemy doesn't need to destroy you. He just needs to get you to sabotage. He knows that if you don't manage your emotions will eventually manage your life, your choices, and your relationships. And here's the reality. Discipline doesn't come easy. It has to be developed. You train your emotions like you train a muscle. The first time you want to yell but choose silence, it feels hard. The first time you want to quit but keep going, it feels heavy. But over time, you begin to rewire your soul. You start to shift from being reactive to being rooted, and that root system becomes your foundation, strong enough to carry the weight of the calling on your life. The more you grow in emotional discipline, the more God can trust you with. Why? Because He knows you won't let your feelings ruin what He places in your hands. He knows you won't let offense destroy divine relationships. He knows you won't let pride block correction. He knows you won't let fear make you delay obedience. That kind of maturity opens doors that talent never could. That kind of consistency builds a life of unshakable influence. So no, emotional discipline may not be glamorous. It may not get applause, but it is the unseen power that sustains everything visible in your life. It is the private mastery that produces public impact. And when you begin to master your emotions, you don't just feel better. You become a vessel of spiritual dominion, walking in clarity, power, and peace that the world can't give and the world can't take away. You can't cast out what you keep cuddling. You can't rebuke what you continue to entertain. you can't break free from what you defend in secret. That's the reason some people stay stuck, not because they don't want deliverance, but because they've made peace with the very thing they need to be set free from. You can cry about the bondage, pray for the breakthrough, and even shout about freedom. But if you're still cradling the dysfunction, you're not ready to let it go. You're just hoping it goes quietly. Freedom requires confrontation. You cannot conquer what you won't confront. But confrontation isn't always loud or public. Sometimes it's the quiet decision at 2 a.m. to stop replying to the toxic text. Sometimes it's deleting the playlist that feeds your lust. Sometimes it's choosing to forgive, even when bitterness feels more familiar. The enemy doesn't always destroy you through attacks. Sometimes he keeps you bound through agreement. You've agreed with shame, you've agreed with insecurity, you've agreed with fear, and you've held it so long it feels like home. But just because something feels familiar doesn't mean it's from God. This is where emotional honesty matters, because as long as you're sugarcoating your stronghold, you're protecting the very thing that's poisoning you. You say, I just like to vent, but what you're really doing is rehearsing offense until it becomes your identity. You say, I'm just being cautious, but what you're really doing is feeding fear and calling it wisdom. You say, that's just how I am, but it's not how you are. It's what you've adapted to. You can't be transformed if you keep defending the dysfunction like it's your personality. At some point, you've got to get brutally honest with yourself. You've got to look at what you've been petting and recognize it's not your comfort. It's your cage. What started as a coping mechanism turned into a stronghold. What started as a season turned into a cycle, and now you're praying for a break through in public while nurturing a stronghold in private. But you will never get free from what you still protect. You will never walk in authority over what you secretly entertain. Think about this. Jesus never asked people, how do you feel about your issue? He asked, do you want to be made whole? That's a different question, because there are some people who want comfort more than wholeness. They want relief more than restoration. But deliverance comes with a cost. It demands the death of excuses. It demands the end of victim thinking. It demands a decision to stop feeding what's fighting your future. You can't cast out a spirit of fear while giving it room and board. You can't bind anxiety while nurturing an atmosphere of chaos. You can't declare freedom while still flirting with the very temptation you said you wanted to escape. Some of you have been rebuking the devil, but the real issue is your agreement with dysfunction. And until you break that agreement, the cycle will continue, no matter how many times you go to the altar. That's why the breakthrough doesn't start in a moment of hype. It starts with a moment of clarity. A moment where you look at the weight, the secret, the crutch, and you say, no more. You can't stay here. You don't get to live in my life rent-free. You don't get to control my mind, my body, my habits, or my future. That's what repentance really is. Not just feeling sorry, but changing direction. It's evicting what doesn't belong. It's canceling the agreement. It's shutting the door and sealing it shut, not because you don't feel like going back, but because you've chosen to move forward. And here's what the enemy fears most, not just your breakthrough, but your decision. He knows the moment you stop cuddling what God called you to kill, your authority rises. He knows when you stop feeding that secret thing, your clarity comes back. He knows that when you stop trying to manage your dysfunction and finally surrender it, you'll step into the identity and authority you were always meant to carry. But you can't cast out what you keep cuddling. You've got to make a choice. Do you want comfort or change? Do you want validation or freedom? Do you want to manage pain or walk in healing? Because you can't have both. You can't walk forward while looking back. You can't live in truth while dancing with denial. You can't declare freedom while secretly feeding chains. When you're ready to let it go completely, not halfway, not 1 foot in, then heaven responds. Grace floods in, power is released, transformation begins, but the first move is yours. Stop cuddling what's killing you. Stop defending what's draining you. Stop excusing what's been enslaving you. It's time to let go, and really let go, so you can finally walk in the freedom that's already been purchased for you.